And the problem is, if you say, oh, you can't judge her defensive or her offensive numbers, but like she's meant to be a defensive player. She is the worst defensive player on this team. No question about it. She is the worst defensive player on the Indiana Fever. And it's so funny. Anytime I make a negative video about Lexi, I'll lose 10 subscribers. Like I've lost.
That is not a small criticism. He is saying Lexi Hall is supposed to survive in this lineup because of defense, and yet he believes defense is now part of the problem. But the bigger question is not whether Lexi is having a bad stretch. It is whether Indiana has reached the point where loyalty to what she used to provide is starting to conflict with what this team actually needs to become.
Does she play defense? And the problem is, she's still playing 15, 20 minutes a game. There's no, like... She has, 10 points combined? She's averaging 2.5 points per game over the last 4. 2.5 points per game. She's had more games this season where she's had more fouls than points than she's had 10-point games. Like, she has 5 10-point games in the season. I think she has 7 games with more fouls than points.
Because the offensive numbers are getting harder to explain away. Over the 4-game stretch he is referencing, Hall was around 2.5 points per game. He also points out that she has had 7 games this season with more fouls than points, compared with 5 games where she reached double figures. Those are ugly numbers for any regular rotation player, but especially for somebody still getting meaningful minutes on a team that believes it can contend. And there is one part of this argument that gets much more uncomfortable later. This is not simply a debate about whether Indiana should change starters for a couple of games. Once you connect Hall's production to the money committed to the roster, this becomes a Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell team-building question. That is where the conversation changes completely.
I wonder, like, what is her points per game in losses? 9 or 4.5. Under 4. She got 5 in a loss, 2 in a loss, 0 in a loss, 9 in a loss, 2 in a loss. In fairness, she had 14 in a loss against LA. And then, again, 2 in a loss, 6 in a loss, 1 in a loss. Like, she's averaging about, I'd say she's averaging about 3 points per game in losses. And
look at the pattern he is highlighting in losses. 5 points, 2, 0, 9, 2. Then the 14-point game against Los Angeles, followed by more nights of 2, 6, and 1. Nobody expects Hall to become a 20-point scorer. That has never been her role. But there is a difference between being a low-usage player and becoming so limited offensively that the opponent can effectively remove you from its defensive priorities. That matters because spacing is not just about three-point percentage on a stat sheet. Spacing is about whether a defender believes there will be consequences for leaving you. If the weak side defender is comfortable shrinking the floor, clogging Caitlin Clark's driving and passing lanes, helping toward Kelsey Mitchell and daring somebody else to make the play, Indiana's entire offense becomes harder. And that is why 3 points can matter more than 3 points. If Hall is not scoring, not creating off the bounce and not forcing aggressive closeouts, every possession puts more creation responsibility onto the stars.
What's she averaging against playoff teams? Which is an interesting one. So against playoff teams, 4.5. Again, just over 4.5. Just over that. And 2, 0, 9. 2, 6, 1. 8. Is 8 her season? 9 is her season high against a playoff team. No, say 10. She's had 10 points. And that was a blowout game without Aja Wilson. That was a blowout without Aja Wilson when it was a benchy bench. She has scored double digits once against a playoff team.
The playoff team split makes the criticism sharper. According to the numbers being read here, Hall had reached double figures against a playoff-caliber opponent only once, and that came in a blowout situation without Aja Wilson. Again, context matters. Hall is not being paid to lead Indiana in shot attempts. She is not supposed to be Kelsey Mitchell. But championship rotations are ruthless. Opponents spend a playoff series finding the one player they can ignore, the one matchup they can hunt, and the one weakness they can repeatedly force into the action. If that player cannot punish the strategy on the other end, coaches keep pressing the same button until you change the lineup. That is the real standard Indiana is moving toward. Not whether Hall can help them survive a random Tuesday in the regular season. Can she stay on the floor during the fourth quarter of a playoff game when every possession becomes a matchup hunt?
Like, at what point do we just come out there and say, like, she's just not good enough. And the Fever have to get off her. I don't think people get it. If Lexi Hull and Monique Billings stay on this team, the Fever can't afford Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell. The more they play her, it feels like the more they're going to have to attach to get off her contract. I was seeing all these things about how, all of these things about how Lexi Hull is untouchable in trade talks. About how they're going to keep the core four together. What are we talking about core four? She's terrible. If Lexi Hull's in your core four, you're not a serious basketball team.
And this is where emotion collides with roster construction. Lexi Hull became easy for Indiana fans to root for because her story made sense. She was the player who worked, defended, hit the floor, fought for minutes, and appeared capable of giving the team more than her role allowed. When a fan base watches someone earn opportunity through effort, attachment follows naturally. But once expectations rise, the evaluation changes. A player can be useful to an improving team and still become a problem for a team trying to win a championship. Calling somebody part of a core four is not just a compliment. It implies that this player is one of the pieces around which you are making future decisions. It means other opportunities may be rejected because you already believe that position is solved. That is why his reaction is so intense. His argument is not merely that Hull is playing badly, it is that Indiana risks confusing familiarity with indispensability, and contenders cannot afford that mistake. The best teams continuously ask a cruel question: if we were building this roster from scratch today, at today's price, would we still make this decision? If the answer changes, sentiment cannot be the thing that stops you from adapting.
It is the worst contract. Katie Lou Samuelson is playing better than Lexi Hull right now. She's off an ACL. Katie Lou is playing better than her. She is one of the highest paid wings in the league. I want to see, is there, what wings are getting paid more than her in the league? Let's look at a average year by year. So, what wings are getting paid more? As in threes. Bridget Carlton on a max. You know what? You could pay Bridget Carlton 3 max contracts and she'd still be outperforming.
Now we reach the money comparison. And this is where the entire debate starts getting serious. The speaker argues Hull is one of the highest paid wings in the league relative to what she is currently producing, then immediately starts comparing her to players he believes provide more offense, more defense, or both. You can disagree with individual comparisons. Different contracts are signed in different situations. Different players have different roles. Age matters. Free agent leverage matters. Team context matters. But the broader point survives all of that. Once a player moves from bargain contract to meaningful financial commitment, the standard changes. Hustle becomes something you appreciate, not something that automatically justifies the salary. That is brutal, but that is professional basketball. When a low-cost player gives you defense, rebounding, and occasional shooting, you say great value. When a higher-paid player gives you exactly the same production or less, suddenly you ask what else that money could have purchased. That is the opportunity cost fans often ignore when discussing contracts. The question is never just, is this player useful? It is this player more useful than the alternatives that same cap space could have created? And Indiana's situation makes that question more important because they are not building around ordinary players. They have Caitlin Clark. They have Kelsey Mitchell. Their window to surround elite offensive talent with complementary pieces is extremely valuable. Every major salary slot affects what type of shooter, defender, secondary creator, or frontcourt piece can fit around them.
Defense. Gabby Williams, maybe the depoy. Alicia Gray, all-star. Copper, all-star. Taylor McBride, snubbed of an all-star, but an all-star. Marina Mabry, okay, scorer. Sykes, at least plays defense, but got injured. Was going to be an all-star. Atkins, okay, Atkins has been not great for 1.1 million. The fact it's 1.1 over 3 is a bad contract, but still, at least she's going to give you double digits. At least she's going to do it. At least she's going to give you double-digit points. Kennedy Burke, 1-year contract, still better than Lexi. Maybe Satu's a worse contract than Lexi, but Lexi Hull's getting paid more than Kayla Thornton. Kayla Thornton was an all-star last year. She was an all-star. Michaela Onyeawere is so much better than Lexi. I can't believe I'm saying that she's better than Lexi. Kyla Charles is way better than Lexi. She's on significantly less money. Tip Hayes is on significantly less.
Listen to those names. Gabby Williams, all-star level players, proven scorers, wings with reputations as defenders, players who can attack a closeout, switch assignments, or create something when the first action dies. This is why the comparison becomes uncomfortable for Hull. Her best argument has historically been that she could impact a game without needing the basketball. That archetype is valuable. Every star needs teammates who defend, cut, rebound, and do not hijack possessions. But the archetype only works when those things remain strengths. If the shooting drops and the defense is no longer trusted against elite matchups, then what is the premium skill keeping you on the floor? Rebounding from the wing helps. Effort matters. Cutting matters. Chemistry matters. None of those things are meaningless, but a championship-level starter generally needs at least one skill that changes what the opponent can do. Elite shooting changes coverage. Elite defense changes matchups. Elite creation changes possessions. If a player is simply competent across several smaller areas without being threatening anywhere, postseason basketball can expose that profile quickly. And there is a counter-argument that deserves to be acknowledged. Hull has previously shown she can shoot better than this. Players go through stretches, roles change, confidence changes, lineup combinations can make somebody look worse than they really are. So declaring that this version of Lexi Hull is permanent would be premature. But Indiana cannot make decisions based entirely on the possibility that an older version reappears. At some point, current production becomes the evidence.
Because, by all accounts, he wants to leave Minnesota. They're there for the taking. They're there for the taking. But the problem is that at taking up $800K salary cap room next season is a player who doesn't shoot, doesn't defend, is a decent rebounder from a wing, can't dribble, doesn't create her own shot, is like not a good off-ball defender anymore, is foul prone. It doesn't pass well. Like, she's not even cutting like she used to. And
This is the payoff that makes the criticism bigger than one struggling starter. He is arguing that the financial commitment could directly limit Indiana's ability to chase another significant piece. The exact future cap math will depend on league rules, contracts, and subsequent roster moves, but the team-building principle is obvious. Money committed to one player is money unavailable somewhere else. And with Caitlin Clark, Indiana's ideal roster blueprint should be incredibly clear. You want shooting that punishes teams for loading toward Clark. You want perimeter defenders capable of taking the hardest assignment so Clark can conserve energy. You want players who can attack a bent defense when Clark creates the first advantage. You want size that does not destroy spacing. And most importantly, you want versatility, because playoff basketball becomes a game of identifying and attacking limitations. Now compare that blueprint with the list of concerns he gives here. Not creating her own shot, limited ball handling, questionable passing impact, foul problems, and declining off-ball defense. That is why this conversation is happening. Not because Lexi Hull suddenly forgot how to play basketball. Not because effort disappeared. The problem is fit at the level Indiana wants to reach. A player can still have useful qualities while no longer being the right starter for a contender. Those two statements can exist at the same time.
Oh, great human. Her effort will never be questioned. But I'm sorry, when your contract goes up, when you're making 80, 90K, when you're shoved on the end of the bench for Christy Wallace, and you're coming in and giving 100% effort, diving on balls, the way the game is being refereed suits your style of play, everything. It's easy to get behind that player. It's easy to get behind a player who is shoved on the end of the bench for an inferior player, who's coming out there giving their all, diving on loose balls, hitting big shots. But like, even in 2024, she wasn't stepping up. Like, in the playoffs, she was terrible. Coming up to the playoffs, she was terrible. She had a 5-game hot streak.
And this is probably the fairest section of the entire criticism, because it explains why Hull built so much goodwill in the first place. When you are buried behind someone fans believe you should be playing ahead of, every good possession feels like proof. Every loose ball matters more. Every three feels like vindication. Fans see somebody fighting for a chance, and naturally want that player rewarded. That underdog identity is powerful, but it can also freeze a player's reputation in time. A fan base remembers the moment when someone was underrated. Even after circumstances change, the contract changes, the role changes, the expectations change, the team changes, yet the emotional evaluation sometimes stays exactly where it was. That is what appears to be happening here. Hull is still being evaluated by some people as the overlooked hustle player who was fighting for recognition. The critic is evaluating her as a paid starter on a team with championship ambitions. Those are two completely different standards. And the uncomfortable part is that both sides may be reacting to a version of Hull that genuinely existed. The question is, which version matters now?
Like, it's really easy to get behind the underpaid hustle player who's not making a lot of money and still puts their body on the line, who'll play through everything, who'll give her all for the team. I get all of that. And when it comes to Lexi Hull, all of that is still there. The problem is, when you are no longer that underpaid hustle player and you become one of the worst contracts in the league, there is a different expectation on you. And when you combine that with her worst season of the last 3, that is a problem. Like, that is a big problem. And as well, not necessarily her fault, the rules changed from under her. The way the game was refereed changed from under her. And now it's at the stage where the game is being refereed differently.
There is also something else here that should not be ignored. Officiating in style. Some defenders thrive when games are allowed to become physical on the perimeter. They can body cutters, disrupt movement, fight through screens, and turn every possession into contact. When officials tighten the whistle or emphasize different types of contact, that style becomes much more difficult. The speaker argues that the way games are now being called does not favor Hull. If that is true, then this is not necessarily a character flaw or even a lack of effort issue. It is adaptation. Basketball constantly changes around players. Rules change. Officiating emphasis changes. Schemes change. Personnel changes. What worked 2 seasons ago does not come with a lifetime guarantee. The valuable players are the ones who find a second solution. If physical defense becomes harder, can you win with positioning? If opponents stop guarding you tightly, can you punish them as a shooter? If you cannot create off the dribble, can you become an elite cutter? If the primary defensive matchup goes elsewhere, can you dominate as a helper, rebounder, and rotator? That is the challenge in front of Hull now. She needs another way to dictate possessions, because effort without impact can become invisible very quickly at this level.
And we're looking at her now as, I don't care about what any stats are concerned, the worst starter in the league. Because if you saw yesterday, was she trusted to guard Jackie Young at any stage in the game? No. Against Minnesota, was she trusted to guard Courtney Williams or Olivia Miles? No. No. They had her guarding Kayla McBride, who was standing in the corner. She no longer is even being trusted to guard the other team's best players. Caitlin Clark is taking tougher defensive matchups in a lot of games than Lexi Hull. She didn't last night. But still, honestly, Chelsea Gray versus Jewel Lloyd. Jewel Lloyd is equally as tough a defensive matchup. But she did take Steph Talbot. She's no longer even being trusted to take defensive matchups because teams know she can't play defense. And then she comes in the game for defensive possessions and the Fever concede every single time.
And this may be the most damaging basketball argument in the entire clip. He is saying Hull is no longer consistently being assigned the opponent's most dangerous perimeter player. That matters enormously because defense has been the foundation of the case for keeping her on the floor. If she were sacrificing offense because she was spending the entire night chasing Jackie Young, Courtney Williams, or another elite creator, you could justify limited scoring. There is an obvious trade-off. You accept fewer offensive contributions because she is taking responsibility for the hardest defensive job. But if other Fever players are taking the tougher matchups while Hull remains limited offensively, then the roster equation changes. You cannot simultaneously excuse the scoring because of defense and then remove the premium defensive responsibility. That is the central tension. And notice what playoff teams would do with that. If Hull is guarding the lowest usage perimeter player, the opponent can use that player as a screener. Suddenly Hull is pulled into actions anyway. If she switches, they hunt the matchup. If Indiana fights through it, they create confusion. If she helps too aggressively, they kick to the corner. This is why individual defense is not just, did your player score? Modern offenses force every defender to participate. There is nowhere to hide for long.
If you're looking at, if you're watching Lexi play, because, look, she's somebody that we all got behind. We all wanted to get behind. Because she was the underpaid player. She had a coach pushing her to the end of the bench, and she was way better than that. Because you can be that hustle player. The problem is now, is the expectation for her is different, and the expectation for the Fever is different. When you're a team, when you are this up-and-coming, scrappy team pushing for the playoffs, then your flaws and deficiencies can be looked past. When you are a team whose next step is to win a title, and we can question whether or not the Fever are good enough for that.
This is the transition Indiana as an organization has to make mentally. The Fever are not the charming young team anymore. Once expectations become championship expectations, the tolerance for incomplete players shrinks. The question stops being whether somebody belongs in the WNBA. Uleji Skunk Hull clearly belongs in the WNBA. The question becomes whether that exact player, in that exact role, at that exact salary, helps produce the best possible version of Indiana. Those distinctions matter. A player can be talented and still be miscast. A player can be valuable and still be overpaid. A player can be a great teammate and still need fewer minutes. A player can have helped build something and still not be the final piece when the team reaches the next stage. Great organizations understand those distinctions before everyone else does. Bad organizations wait until the weakness becomes painfully obvious in a playoff series. And Indiana cannot waste postseason lessons if the warning signs are already visible during the regular season.
I still think that they are the second best team in the league. We saw it last night. I thought the Fever were complete and utter dog shit last night. And they still should have won that game. Like, when it comes down to it, they're not going to be like, there's no world in which the Fever should have lost that game yesterday. They nearly stole a game from Minnesota. This is a team, we saw it. They were up 2 at the end of the first quarter and they went up 25 minutes in. There are no teams that can, when the Fever are in a flow state, they are unguardable. So I still put them in contenders. You can take them out of that if you want, but I still put them in there.
Now consider the other half of this argument. The speaker still believes Indiana is one of the best teams in the league. He says they were awful in the Minnesota game and still nearly stole it. That actually makes the Hull discussion more urgent, not less. If you believe the Fever are mediocre, then none of this matters nearly as much. You keep developing, you experiment, you accept flaws. But if you believe they can genuinely challenge for a title, every marginal advantage matters. One extra shooter matters. One defender capable of switching onto a star matters. One player who can attack a rotating defense matters. One possession in May might not feel important. One possession in a deciding playoff game can end your season. That is why contenders obsess over the bottom half of the rotation. Everybody sees what Caitlin Clark can do. Everybody sees what Kelsey Mitchell can do. Who makes the next decision? Who hits the open shot? Who survives the switch? Who grabs the rebound? Who avoids the unnecessary foul? That is where Hull's role has to be judged, not against the lowest possible standard, but against the players Indiana may eventually have to beat.
Now, and Lexi Hull brings nothing. She brings, at this stage, I think you need to start Raven. If you don't want to start Sophie and you like Sophie off the bench, start Raven. Start Raven because she doesn't rebound well enough for it to be a size issue. Like, start Raven because they got to do something. They got to do something. Genuinely, they got to do something because Lexi's just not straight up, just not good enough. She's not playing well enough, and maybe she'll figure it out at some stage in the year. Because, look, I think even if you get 2025 Lexi Hull back, I don't think that's good enough to be a starter on a championship-winning team.
And there is the proposed solution: change the starting lineup and give Raven a chance. That does not automatically solve everything. Raven brings her own questions, particularly around experience, shooting, and whether she is ready for consistent high-leverage minutes. A younger player can make mistakes Hull might avoid. There is always a cost when you change a rotation. But the reason the idea is interesting is not because Raven has already proven she is better. It is because Indiana may have reached the stage where maintaining the current setup has become the riskier choice. Sometimes coaches stick with a veteran or familiar starter because the alternative is uncertain. But uncertainty can be useful when the current answer is not producing enough. A lineup change could also reveal whether Hull's best role is actually smaller. Imagine she moves to the bench, plays against different matchups, and is no longer asked to justify starter-level responsibility. Suddenly the expectations shift. Instead of needing to be a two-way starter for a contender, she can become an energy wing, whose job is to defend specific assignments, rebound, cut hard, and take open shots. That might be a much healthier role, because this conversation does not have to end with Lexi Hull is useless. That is too simplistic. The more interesting conclusion is that Indiana may be asking the wrong version of Lexi Hull to exist. They may be asking a valuable specialist to function like a complete starting wing. If the shooting rebounds, the defense improves, and she starts winning important matchups again, this entire conversation looks premature. If not, then Indiana has to be ruthless. The Caitlin Clark era changes the clock. When you have a player who bends defenses, sells arenas, and gives you a legitimate offensive foundation, you do not build casually around her. You maximize the window. You find players whose strengths become more dangerous because Clark exists. That means shooters who get cleaner looks because two defenders shade toward her. cutters who feast when defenders turn their heads, secondary handlers who attack 4-on-3 situations, defenders who let Clark avoid wasting energy wrestling with elite scorers for 40 minutes. That should be the standard for every roster decision, and that is ultimately why the Lexi Hall debate has become so emotional. Fans are not really arguing about one player's two-point night. They are arguing about what Indiana believes its future is. If this is still an ascending team with time to figure things out, you stay patient. If this is a championship team right now, you make championship decisions right now. So which side are you on? Do you keep Lexi Hall in the starting lineup and trust that the player Indiana fans believed in will eventually return? Or has the Fever reached the point where they have to change the rotation before this weakness follows them into the playoffs? Let me know which move you would make, and if you want more Fever and WNBA breakdowns like this, like the video and subscribe.